August 1590. An English governor returned to that island after 3 years, where he had left behind his family, friends, and a group of colonists. He had hoped to hear human voices there once again, to see children, to see fires burning inside the houses. But what he saw was something entirely different. It was as if the entire settlement had suddenly been wiped out of existence. There was no one, no bodies, no clear signs of battle.
There are no ruins, just abandoned houses, and a single word carved into a piece of wood: Croatoan. For over 4 centuries, people have been trying to decipher the meaning of that one word. Where did those people go? Did they die? Did they move somewhere else? Or did they blend into another society to the point where they vanished from history altogether? This is one of history's most famous mysteries, the Lost Colony of Roanoke. Why did they go there? The story began long before this mystery unfolded. Towards the end of the 16th century, England sought to expand its influence in the New World. Spain, France, and other European powers were attempting to establish a foothold in the Americas at the time. England did not want to be left behind. Sir Walter Raleigh was a key figure in this plan. His goal was to establish a permanent English settlement in North America. The English had previously launched expeditions to Roanoke Island as well.
However, in 1587, the most significant expedition began with a new group. John White led this group. He was not merely the leader of the expedition. He was an artist, an observer, and later, the governor of Roanoke. Their original objective was to establish a permanent settlement further north in the Chesapeake Bay region. But their journey did not proceed according to plan. Ultimately, they were compelled to remain on Roanoke Island. And that marked the beginning of one of history's most mysterious chapters: a new settlement. In July 1587, John White and his group arrived at Roanoke Island. They began restoring some of the structures and fortifications left behind by a previous English expedition. However, the situation was not easy from the very beginning. There were food shortages, relations with the local Algonquian people were not always peaceful, and an uncertain future lay ahead. Yet, there was a moment in that small settlement that remains particularly memorable in history. August 18th, 1587. A child was born that day. Her name? Virginia Dare. She is known to history as the first English child born in the New World. A new life, a new colony, and a dream of a new future. But no one knew then that just a few years after her birth, the entire colony would become one of history's unsolved mysteries: John White's departure. But problems were mounting in the settlement. There was a need for food and other supplies. So the colonists asked John White to return to England. His task was to return quickly with fresh supplies. John White, too, believed that he would return very soon. He did not know that this journey would not take just a few months, but would last nearly 3 years. White returned to England towards the end of 1587. But England was facing another major crisis at the time. Tensions between England and Spain were escalating into war. Then came the Spanish Armada. English ships were deployed for the country's defense. Consequently, John White's plans to return to Roanoke were repeatedly postponed. And on that small island, his family and the colonists kept waiting.
3 years of silence. A year passed. Then another. Then yet another. But no definite news came from Roanoke. John White did not know if his family was alive. He did not know the state of the colony. And above all, he did not know if the people there were waiting for his return or if they had already left. Finally, in 1590, he got the opportunity to set sail for Roanoke. After 3 years of waiting, John White arrived back near the island. One question lay before him. Where were they all when everyone had vanished? August 18th, 1590, John White set foot on Roanoke Island. It was also Virginia Dare's 3rd birthday. White had likely hoped that his family would welcome him. But the island was eerily silent. There was no one there. No colonists, no children, no familiar faces. The settlement was abandoned. But the strangest thing was, there were no clear signs of a fierce battle or a sudden attack. White and his men began to search. Then they discovered a strange mark. Carved into the trunk of a tree, Crow, and written on a palisade, Croatoan. White had previously agreed upon a signal with the colonists. If they moved elsewhere before his return, they were to carve the name of their new location onto a tree or piece of wood. And if they were forced to leave due to danger, they were supposed to add a cross symbol to that signal. But there was no cross. To White, the meaning seemed fairly clear. They had likely moved to Croatoan. But was that really what had happened? What exactly is Croatoan? Croatoan was not just a word, it was the name of a people. And at the same time, the name of a place. Croatoan was associated with the area known today as Hatteras Island. The Croatoan people lived there, and they also had contact with the English settlers of Roanoke. So when John White saw the word Croatoan, he surmised that the colonists might have gone there. He even attempted to head towards Croatoan to search for them. But once again, fate stood in his way. A storm thwarted his ship's plans, and ultimately, White was forced to return to England without finding those people. So where did they go? Now begins the most crucial part of the mystery. For over 4 centuries, researchers have explored various possibilities. Yet to this day, no single theory has been conclusively proven. The first possibility: they moved to Croatoan. This is one of the most popular theories. The reason is that they left behind the word Croatoan themselves. Furthermore, English artifacts from that era have been discovered on Hatteras Island. But the problem is, these artifacts could not be definitively linked to the people of the Lost Colony. There are no confirmed graves. There are no confirmed settlement ruins. So while it is a strong possibility, it is not a proven fact. A second possibility: they headed towards Chesapeake Bay. It must be remembered that Chesapeake Bay was their intended destination. They likely attempted to leave Roanoke and make their way to that region. Later, stories emerged from the local population suggesting that some of the earlier English settlers had perished in conflicts.
However, no conclusive archaeological evidence has been found to support this theory so far. A third possibility: they split into smaller groups and moved elsewhere. Remaining as a large group might have been difficult under the circumstances of that time. There was a food shortage. The local environment was harsh. So they might have integrated with various indigenous communities or established settlements elsewhere. This theory could explain why no signs of a major battle were found at Roanoke. But then again, there is no definitive evidence to support this.
Another theory: disease, famine, or natural disaster. At that time, the Outer Banks region experienced a prolonged drought. There was a food shortage. Disease was also a real threat. So some of the colonists might have died. But this theory alone is not enough to explain the disappearance of the entire colony. Because when John White returned, he found no mass graves or any clear evidence confirming the destruction of the entire colony. So, were they truly lost? This is where the mystery of Roanoke deepens. Because we know they were there. We know John White left them behind and went to England. We know he returned 3 years later. And we know the colony was no longer there. But what happened next? That remains unknown. Another factor has further complicated this mystery. The coastline of Roanoke Island has changed significantly over the past 4 centuries. Some researchers even believe that archaeological evidence of the old settlement might lie underwater today.
More than 4 centuries have passed. Roanoke Island is no longer the world it once was. The forest has changed. The coastline has changed. The sea has changed. But one question still remains. Where did those people go? Perhaps they moved towards Croatoan. Perhaps they merged with another indigenous community. Perhaps they fell victim to disease, starvation, or conflict. Or maybe some part of their story is still hidden underground, in an ancient artifact, or under the sea. John White never found his family again, and the fate of the people of Roanoke still remains a question mark in the pages of history, like 2 words carved on a tree: Croatoan. And the mystery remains.